Hello and welcome to the panel session today. I would like to welcome you all warmly to our panel session on creating a model law, inter-country comparisons on factory farming. This panel session will look at different legislative examples from around the world relating to animal law from academic experts. It is expected the session will result in an expert view on law relating to intensive animal agriculture. And I would like you to add any questions to the chat box as we go along. I would now like to introduce our chair for this session, Abhishek Singhvi, the MP and Queen's Counsel for the Indian Supreme Court. Abhishek, over to you.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. Friends, industrialized animal agriculture presents a significant global threat. We are literally eating our way into extinction. The world's demand for meat, eggs, and dairy is growing exponentially. These animal proteins are a product of an unsustainable and broken food system, the factory farm system. It is premised on raising more and more animals for human consumption, cutting all possible corners, be it public health, environment, rights of humans and animals. Today, animal agriculture has achieved a tremendous feat of industrialization. In fact, those would make the industrial revolution people envious. It has perfected calculations of minimum input and maximum output to secure myopic objectives of profit maximization. It has successfully commodified the lives and souls of animals, as well as the human labor force working in this industry. The farms represent a quagmire of animal abuse and labor exploitation, where indiscriminate use of antibiotics, growth hormones, threaten public health with antimicrobial resistance. Air, water, and soil pollution represent additional collateral damage. Interestingly, of course, the animal agriculture industry has escaped altogether or largely the radar of regulatory correction, despite being clearly more polluting than oil, tobacco, and transportation industries. Consider these startling statistics. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a UN affiliated body, recognizes that animals agriculture contributes to 15% of the world's total greenhouse gas emissions. 15%. It's a huge carbon footprint industry, and yet precious little has been done to put the brakes on it. 55% of the world's crop calories are consumed by humans directly. 36% is used for animal feed. These statistics reveal an inefficient food security system. 13 pounds of grain and 2,500 gallons of water required to produce 1 pound of meat. Yet livestock farm is unbelievably subsidized and promoted by all governments. Antigenic shifts involving viruses found only in animals mutating to become a dangerous novel strain affecting human health is another phenomenon. The US Center for Disease Control identifies 16 strains of novel influenza viruses, of which 11 have been traced as originating from commercial poultry establishments. This is, of course, without even counting or speculating about Wuhan. United Nations FAO has flagged that 70% of emerging infectious diseases in humans are of zoonotic origin. It reiterated that livestock health is the weakest link in our global health chain. And yet there is not a single treaty or convention that binds government to reduce dependency on animals for food. This will be, as time goes, even a greater threat to humanity in future, but already it uh, has revealed itself, in my humble view, as a cesspool of crimes against humanity, crimes against the planet, and institutional crimes against fellow earthlings. The five freedoms of animal welfare, which were formalized in 79 as the guidelines of the OIE, an acronym for an international organization, stress that public health is interconnected and dependent upon the health of animals. Yet these guidelines and codes are optional and aspirational. India, of course, does recognize these five freedoms, namely from hunger, thirst, and malnutrition, from fear and distress, from physical and thermal discomfort, from pain, injury, and disease, and to express normal patterns of behavior. And the Indian Supreme Court has gone further. In judgments of the Supreme Court, reading these five freedoms into our Domestic Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. They said, and I quote the Supreme Court saying, in our view, life means something more than mere survival or existence. It means to lead a life with some intrinsic worth, honor, and dignity for animals as well. I had the opportunity to argue on this basis against the abusive practice of bull taming, for example, in South India. I'm also pleading separately for these freedoms to be accorded to egg laying hens who are confined in battery cages for their entire lives of about a year and a half in areas the size of a small, I repeat, small iPad. Friends, the idea that some lives matter less is the root cause of all that is wrong in the world. We must utilize our legal ingenuity to frame such concepts in a rights based perspective and transition from a patronizing welfare approach to guaranteeing rights to animals. The bill I introduced as a parliamentarian in early 2020, just before the onset of COVID, was a private member's bill, and though skeleton and though overtaken by COVID related sparse parliamentary sessions, it looks at framing a more sustainable and ethical animal system. It is heartening that bills like the Factory System Reforms Act have been introduced by Senators Booker and Elizabeth Warren in US, calling for a moratorium on new factory farms and phasing out by 2040. There is some kind of a model for international conventions. For example, the draft of the Global Animal Law Association. It's important, whatever name you call it, to have a convention because A, it is legally binding, has the power of a treaty as opposed to mere declaration of principles. B, it is consensual. Apart from the five freedoms above, which I mentioned, it has the three R's: reduce, reuse, and rehabilitate. Third, it is evolutive, contains both existing national legislation principles, concepts of animal sentience, dignity, research, etc. Last but not the least is the exploration and the pushing and the incentivization of alternatives, plant based alternatives, cell based cultivated meat. Unfortunately, these face unfair restrictions on labeling. When you bully governments to prevent a soy milk manufacturer from calling his product soy milk, or the same for coconut milk, you get an idea, as it happened in certain European jurisdictions, as to the influence of the dairy industry. Ultimately, we need to both have a carrot and stick policy. We need to incentivize and we need to deter. Uh, would it be too radical to grant animal rights? I think Jeremy Bentham had the best answer. He said, the question is not can they reason? The question is not can they talk? The question is can they suffer? Why should the law refuse its protection to any sensitive being? It is ultimately the responsibility because exploitation has attained a new meaning in this industry. A FAO report as recently as 2019 said more than 80 billion land animals are raised for food globally, and 150 million tons of seafood was produced for humans in 1 year 16. I hope you will embrace my idea and join me in pursuing an honorable defense for a billion lives. Let me end by quoting Martin Luther King. He said, and I quote, one day the absurdity of the almost universal human belief in the slavery of other animals will be palpable. We shall then have discovered our souls and become worthier of sharing this planet with them. Unquote. Thank you very much and Godspeed for all the discussants.